All right, hello. So welcome to Home Automation Without the Cloud. So this is me, and for years I've been dreaming about building a truly smart home where everything just kind of does what I want automatically. Like maybe I'm sitting on the couch on a bright Sunday afternoon, my cat is on my lap, and I decide that I want to watch a movie. But I'm already really comfortable, and getting up to turn off lights, that's a real drag. So in this dream world of mine, I would give a single voice command or press a single button, and the whole environment would shift into a configuration that's optimized for midday movie watching. The lights would turn off and the curtains would close to eliminate glare. The TV and speakers would shift into theater mode, and a cold beer and a bucket of popcorn would just materialize out of nowhere in front of me. And then through all that, right, the cat never had to get off my lap. So that's the kind of smart automated home that I see in my dreams. So when COVID hit, I decided I needed a hobby, so I wanted to see how close I could get to my dream using today's technology. Now, unfortunately, despite the technology available today, most people are nowhere near that level of automation in their homes. We spent almost $75 billion on home automation in 2021, and for most people, the pinnacle of their automation experience is turning on a light bulb from their phone as long as their internet connection is up and no one turned off the power at the wall switch. And I think that's dumb. I think it's dumb that all that money and tech is focused on basic use cases that don't provide the rich experience that I'm dreaming of. Now, you can do more interesting and useful things. It just requires a little bit of skill, a little bit of knowledge, and a little bit of elbow grease. And that brings us to today. This session is a summary of everything I've learned and implemented over the last few years. I'll show you what's possible with today's technology, and I'll give you a roadmap to follow if you decide to follow in my footsteps. So we're going to talk about why you should care about local control and execution, the different types and devices and protocols that are available, and how to use this thing called Home Assistant to control everything. Then I'll show you how I'm using those things to make my home smarter, including adding smarts to my dumb legacy appliances. We'll also talk about how you can remotely access your locally controlled smart home and how you can use voice control without relying on Alexa or Google. So to start, let's talk about why you should care about automating your home without the cloud. So I think it's dumb for your smart home to lose functionality because your internet connection is down or because some cloud service is having a problem. A year or two ago, the Ring doorbell system went down. Some people had their smart door locks integrated into that app. They couldn't get into their homes because of an AWS outage. There was a similar issue with the Google Nest ecosystem. The web service went down. People with Nest thermostats were unable to locally control their air conditioning until it came back up. And those were just temporary outages, right? If the service provider goes out of business, it could completely brick your devices. Second reason I'm anti-cloud is security, right? These devices are notorious for having poor security, and you may not care if a Chinese hacker can change the color of your light bulb, but it's a different story when we're talking about cameras and door locks. Third, cloud services focus on very basic use cases like turning on that bulb with your phone. They don't support the more complex automations that I'm talking about that involve multiple devices working together. And I'm anti-cloud because the user experience can suck. So one of the first things that I did on my journey was I tried SmartThings. I had just created a movie time automation that would dim all the lights. My wife and I are getting ready to watch a movie, and I want to show off. So she's reaching for the lights, and I'm like, all right, check this out. Alexa, it's movie time. But I got the syntax wrong. So Alexa responds with, well, I don't know what you mean. So I'm like, oops, I mean, Alexa, start the movie time scene. But there was some kind of hiccup between my device, AWS, and SmartThings because nothing happened. I'm just standing there looking stupid. So my wife rolls her eyes, turns off the lights of the switch, and sits down on the couch, right? And then a second later, I get a ping on my phone from SmartThings saying it can't reach my light because turning off the switch killed the power to the smart bulb, took it off the network, and made it unavailable by the time they got around to processing that event. So enough ranting from my soapbox. The point is, running your smart home locally is a key element of that smart home nirvana that I'm dreaming about. And speaking of that smart home nirvana, let's take a minute to identify what a truly smart home is, at least to me, because these are the things that local control will help us achieve. First, I think automation is better than control. As an example, consider the laundry room in my basement. To get there, I have to pass through 3 distinct areas, each with their own lighting controls. Controlling the lights from my phone, that's a neat trick, but it's not useful if my hands are full of laundry. And using my voice is a pain because there are 3 distinct areas, and giving 3 distinct voice commands kind of sucks. I could group the lights into a scene. I could use my voice to activate the scene, but then I have to train my wife and kids to use the scene. I have to make sure a smart speaker can hear us when we say it, etc. And I don't really want to control the lights. I want them to be automated. So to do that, I put in motion sensors in each area, so the lights turn on automatically when I enter and turn off automatically after I leave. Now, of course, motion-controlled lights aren't really a big deal. I could have bought some cheap, dumb, motion-controlled switches from Walmart and done the same thing. But those cheap Walmart switches are examples of dumb automations, because each switch only knows about whether or not it senses motion. It doesn't know if any other switch is sensing motion. It doesn't know what time of day it is, and it doesn't know if you want it to control the lights at any given minute. And that lack of context really limits their usefulness. So my living room is a great example of why context matters. I put motion-controlled lights there as well, and then my daughter complained that if she was sitting still on the couch watching TV, the motion sensor would think the room was empty and would turn the lights off. She had to wave her arms in the air every 10 minutes to turn them back on. Now, by itself, that's not a very compelling argument to me. I think making kids move their bodies to watch TV, that's a feature, not a bug. But I'm really picky about my own TV watching experience. So we sit down one night for a family movie. I get the lights right the way I want them. And then the moment someone reaches forward to get popcorn, it triggers the sensor, shoots the lights back up, and ruins it. So it's one thing to disrupt my daughter's TV time, but I draw the line at things screwing up my movie night. Dumb automations are sometimes useful, other times they get in the way. And I'm far more interested in making smart automations that are context aware. My daughter wants the lights to stay on when she's watching TV during the day, even if she's still. I want lights to stay off if I'm watching a movie at night, even if there's motion. And we both want the lights to turn off automatically when we're done in the room. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit. Third, I don't care what happens to my internet connection or any other computer on the internet. If I have electricity, I want my lights to be automated. And lastly, not everyone in my house is as enthusiastic about this as I am. So my last rule of a truly smart home is that other people shouldn't need a training manual or a fancy phone to navigate my house. They should be able to use lights and switches the way they would expect, and the automations don't get in anyone's way. So that's my vision of a truly smart home, and running everything locally makes these things possible. So how do we get there? These are the three ingredients that you need for a basic, locally controlled home. You need a hub to control everything. You need to choose a protocol that your hub and devices will use to communicate, and you will need at least one device that uses that protocol, like a bulb or a switch or whatever. We'll talk about hubs first. The hub is the brain of your smart home, right? It listens for events and then responds to the events by sending out commands, right? You open a door to your room, it sends out the command to turn on the lights. If this brain lives in the cloud, then you have all those connectivity and latency issues that I want to avoid. So to run things locally, that brain has to live in your house and on your network. I explored 5 different hubs as I was going through this. Each of these things is capable of acting as that brain in your smart home, but in the end, I found one clear winner. So I ruled out SmartThings because it was too cloud-centric, and I ruled out HomeKit because it was too Apple-centric. Hubitat is ugly and hard to use, and HomeSeer is a nice product, but it's a commercial offering, and I'm cheap, and I didn't want to pay anything. Home Assistant was just right for my needs. So Home Assistant is a free, open-source home automation hub that has a very active community. The screenshots and examples in this talk are all from Home Assistant, but many of the concepts that I'll share also apply to the other hubs. Now, Home Assistant is free software, but you have to run that on some sort of computer in your home, and there are lots of ways to do that. If you want a plug-and-play turnkey option, you can buy a product called Home Assistant Green. It's designed specifically for Home Assistant. It comes with everything pre-installed. But you don't have to buy new hardware because Home Assistant can be installed on existing stuff you already have. It can run on a Raspberry Pi or a thin client PC. You can download VMs for Apple, Mac, Linux machines, and you can run it in Docker. So bottom line, everyone in this room should be able to run Home Assistant for free if you want to. Now, in order for that hub to be useful, it has to be able to communicate with your devices. And generally speaking, home automation devices communicate over one of 4 different protocols: Zigbee, Z-Wave, Matter, and then the ubiquitous Wi-Fi. Now, unfortunately, even though it's so widely available, Wi-Fi isn't really a good choice for a locally controlled smart home. First, there's no standard that specifies how local control should work over Wi-Fi. So some devices will expose an API that you can access over the local network, but those APIs are rarely documented, and typically they're designed to support the vendor's app. The vendor doesn't really want them being used by a third party. From the vendor's perspective, the need for a device-specific app is the whole point, because they want you to use their app, they want you to register your information with them, and they want to monetize your engagement with the device any way they can. And since every device has its own app, it's hard to integrate different brands and types of Wi-Fi devices together. And of course, those apps are usually really poorly built and insecure. I'm not saying that you can never use Wi-Fi devices. I have some in my own home. The point is that you should learn about the other options and choose Wi-Fi only as a last resort. So excluding Wi-Fi, there are 3 viable protocols that you should know about. 2 of these, Zigbee and Z-Wave, have been around for a long time and are very widely supported. The third one, Matter, is very new. Now, I will skip the overly detailed and boring review of each protocol, and I'll give you this grossly oversimplified summary. Zigbee devices are inexpensive, but they share the same wireless frequency as Wi-Fi. So a busy Zigbee mesh can disrupt Wi-Fi and vice versa. And additionally, some of the low-cost devices can have reliability and interoperability issues. Z-Wave devices tend to cost more, but in my experience are very reliable and feature-rich. And while Matter has some really laudable goals, it's not quite ready for prime time. It might be the future of the interconnected smart home, but for today, I recommend Zigbee or Z-Wave. Again, that's an extreme oversimplification. Any one of those profiles can handle your basic use cases. And you can mix and match these things. I personally have a bunch of Z-Wave devices, a handful of Zigbee, and a couple of Wi-Fi. Everything is controlled through Home Assistant, and for the most part, I don't have to think about which device uses which protocol. But there is one technical detail that you need to consider. These protocols are all wireless, so to use them, you need some way for your Home Assistant machine to receive and transmit those wireless signals. For Z-Wave and Zigbee, you can get an inexpensive USB dongle that contains the necessary radio. They're plug and play, really easy to use. Matter is a little bit different. It uses a protocol called Thread, and Thread requires a dedicated device to act as a border router. That border router is responsible for bridging the wireless signal onto your local TCP/IP network. Now, the good news is that various Apple, Amazon, and Google devices have Thread built in, and they can act as that border router for you. If you already have one of those devices, then theoretically, you should be able to run Matter. If you don't have one of those devices, stick with Z-Wave or Zigbee. So that covers 2 of the 3 basic ingredients of a locally controlled smart home. To make anything interesting, though, we have to add devices into the mix. And we'll start with the simplest thing that you can do, which is a light bulb. So this is a color Z-Wave controlled light bulb being managed through Home Assistant. I can turn it on and off, I can change the brightness, I can change the color of the LED. I can do it from my phone and from my computer. It's not very exciting yet, so let's add another bulb to the mix. Now this is interesting because the living room bulb uses Z-Wave, but my nightstand bulb is controlled over Wi-Fi. Now I said earlier that you should avoid Wi-Fi devices when possible, and that's true, but it doesn't mean that you can never use them. In this case, someone reverse engineered the local API that brand uses to control its device, and they published an integration for Home Assistant that allows it to show me the exact same user interface as the Z-Wave bulb. So as a user of the system, I can't tell a difference between them. The real difference, though, is that the local API wasn't designed for third-party usage, so the integration could break in the future if the vendor changes how their APIs work. I don't have to worry about that with Z-Wave. Another benefit of Z-Wave or Zigbee is that Home Assistant can show you a centralized management console for all those devices. Not only can I see everything listed in one place, but I can reconfigure things, view how much battery is left, etc. Wi-Fi devices don't have a standardized management protocol, so you won't find a centralized list like this. And Z-Wave and Zigbee give you more than just bulbs. I have a thermostat and temperature sensors, so I can track and manage climate controls. And I also have a Z-Wave door lock. Integration gives me all the functionality that you would find like in a cloud-based smart lock, but without the subscription fee. So 3 years into this, I now have over 150 devices in Home Assistant between bulbs, switches, sensors, speakers, cameras, phones, TVs, whatever. Now, I don't care about flashy interfaces, so my primary dashboard is very bare bones, just a bunch of toggles. But these dashboards are totally configurable, so you can make them look really nice if you want to, and I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. Now, earlier I said that automation is better than control, and so far I've only shown you ways of controlling devices. So let's talk about automating these things. So for context, we'll go back to my living room. I want the lights to turn on automatically when we first enter the room. My daughter wants the lights to stay on while she watches TV without waving her arms in the air, and we both want the lights to stay off during evening movies. And finally, I want the lights to turn off automatically when the room is empty. Now, those requirements are a little bit tricky, but if we can pull it off, then we'll both be happy. And that's great for me and my daughter, but it turns out that my wife has really bad mojo when it comes to technology. Stuff often misbehaves for her in strange ways. And she gets really irritated if weird things happen with the lights and I'm not around to fix it. So to make everyone happy, we're going to add one more requirement that gives her a way of disabling the automations if they're getting on her nerves. So if we break these requirements down a little bit, we end up with 4 different things to figure out. We need a way of detecting if people are in the room or not. We need a way of detecting what people are doing in the room. We need a way of controlling the lights based on those details, and we need a kill switch or some other way for my wife to make it all stop. So motion sensing is easy. There are battery-powered Zigbee and Z-Wave sensors that stick on your wall with adhesive. They report status into Home Assistant. The batteries can last for months, so it's really easy to tell which rooms are occupied. But activity recognition is more complicated. The motion sensor tells me if someone's moving around in the room, but that's it. It doesn't tell us if we're watching TV during the day, a movie at night, doing a puzzle, whatever. Now, in my case, the TV in the living room uses a Roku as its streaming device. And there is a Roku integration for Home Assistant that not only lets me control playback, but it also provides diagnostic information like what app is currently active. If the TV is on or is off, then the active app is just Roku. That tells me it's idle. But if the active app is something else, like Netflix, that's a really good signal that someone is watching the TV. Third component is an ability to turn lights on or off as needed. Simplest thing you can do is buy some Z-Wave or Zigbee bulbs and throw them in your existing lamps. Lots of pretty colors, and it requires no special skill to change a light bulb. But I recommend that you put in smart switches instead of smart bulbs. The main problem with smart bulbs is they need to remain powered at all time. When you turn off a smart bulb, it just turns off the LEDs, right? The device itself remains powered and on the network so that it can receive the command to turn the LEDs back on. If you put one of those bulbs in a lamp or a ceiling fixture controlled by a wall switch, and someone in your house flips that switch, no amount of screaming at Alexa is going to do anything until that switch is turned back on. But now if you replace the switch itself, it's a non-issue. Your spouse, your kids, your guests, they can all use the wall switch like the cave people they are without affecting your automations. Now additionally, some switches have extra features that can be really, really useful, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, finally, let's talk about the kill switch. This could also be called the Save Seth's Marriage switch because it allows my wife and I to peacefully coexist in my evolving house of wonders. Now, in Home Assistant, you can create custom toggle switches, and you can use those switches in your automations. So I will generally set up 2 control toggles for each room. One controls whether the lights are turned on automatically. One controls if they turn off automatically. So once those 4 elements are in place, we can create an automation that manages the lights. So automations start with 1 or more triggers, and there are all kinds of triggers. In this case, I begin the automation when the motion sensor starts detecting motion. Now, automations can have 1 or more conditions, and these are things that have to be true for the automation to keep processing. So first, I make sure that the auto on toggle is enabled. If my wife has turned that flag off, the automation won't process. Then I check the status of the TV. If the TV is in use, I assume the lights are already set the way the room's occupants want them to be, and I don't do anything. And lastly, the automation only fires during certain hours of the day. Because sometimes, like when a poorly tested automation incurs the wrath of my wife, I sleep on the couch in this room. And I don't want the cats running around triggering motion at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I limit the automation to run during the primary hours of the day. So when motion is detected, the kill switch hasn't been activated, the TV is not currently in use, and it's during waking hours, then the automation turns on my lamp. Now at this point, I have an automation that keeps my daughter and I happy, and there's a kill switch for my wife. But it's still not perfect. My wife is capable of opening Home Assistant on her phone to disable automations, but she doesn't like doing it. So what I really want is some way to enable the kill switch without using a phone app. Now I mentioned earlier that Z-Wave and Zigbee's light switches often have extra features. One of those features is support for double tap operations. So in my living room, if you single tap the switch, it will turn the lights on or off like a normal cave person would expect. But if you double tap the on switch, it turns the lights on and it keeps them on by disabling the auto off automations. And likewise, if you double tap off, it turns the lights off and keeps them off by disabling the auto on automations. And the final touch is I have an automation that re-enables those settings after a couple hours. So my wife can double tap a switch as she enters a room, she can do whatever she wants to do, and then she can leave. She doesn't have to remember to turn anything back on, it just happens automatically. So sometimes when I explain this to people, they think it's overkill. But to me, this is an example of a near perfect smart automation. It's context aware to do the right thing at the right time. It doesn't cost me any money or leak my information, and it reduces the amount of time I spend sleeping on the couch. That's a win-win-win. So that covers lights and switches and motion sensors. Let's talk about another interesting use case. So I have a standard old dumb washing machine, no internet connection of any kind. And our laundry machine, or our laundry room, is located in the basement, which is way far away from our general living area. So on occasion, we'll run a load of clothes and then find ourselves wondering if it's time to move them to the dryer. Now we could walk all the way downstairs to look, but as you've probably guessed by now, that's not my style. What is my style is buying a Z-Wave enabled power switch or a power plug like this one. That plug reports the amount of power being drawn through it into Home Assistant, and I can use that to determine if the washer is running or not. And that's neat, but instead of constantly looking at my dashboard, I would rather be notified when it's time to do something. So I have notifications set up that will trigger when the power usage goes from a non-zero number down to 0. That means the washer was running, it is now stopped, so it's a reasonable assumption that there's a sopping wet mess of clothes that needs moved. I perform the notification in a few different ways. So I send a thing to my phone that's not very exciting, but I'm not the only one in my home that does laundry. So when a load is finished, I also make a text-to-speech announcement over our smart speakers. Now we have those smart speakers in our kitchen, living room, and bedroom. So anyone in those rooms will hear a nice, friendly message that the laundry needs moved to the dryer. But playing audio in the bedroom is tricky. I would happily get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be told about a water leak, but my wife isn't too keen on being woken at 3 o'clock in the morning because an overnight load of laundry has finished. So to manage that complexity, I created a custom reusable script that handles all my text-to-speech logic. It's like a utility function in your code, right? You wrap all this logic up and you can reuse it anywhere you want. That script is smart enough to choose which devices will play the message based on the time of day and the type of message. So a water leak notification will play everywhere, but laundry alerts don't play in the bedroom while we're sleeping. Now, if you buy a smart appliance that has built-in notifications, you're paying a lot of money and you're limited to whatever notifications that thing supports. Doing it locally gives me way more control and saves me money at the same time. So far, everything I've showed you has used off-the-shelf plug-and-play devices, and it's been really, really easy to set up. Next, I want to show you how you can save some money and handle even more complex scenarios if you're willing to put in just a little bit of extra effort. And I'm going to use my garage as the example. We have a lot of expensive tools in the garage, and I want to keep them secure. So specifically, I want a passive indicator inside the house that will tell me if the garage door was left open. Secondly, I want a camera to take recordings of the garage, so if there's a theft, right, we'll have evidence. But I don't need gigabytes of videos of my kids getting soda from the garage fridge. So I only want to save those videos if motion occurs while the garage door is open. If the door is closed, I don't need video evidence. And lastly, I want to store those videos on a hard drive inside the house so a thief can't steal the video recordings and the tools at the same time. That would be nearly impossible to configure if I was relying on cloud services. But running everything locally made it pretty easy. I only needed to add a couple of additional components to pull it all together. So first, I bought a really simple distance sensor for like $2 so I can track the status of the garage door. Now that little sensor is mounted to the garage ceiling, pointing down, and when the garage door is closed, it measures the distance from the ceiling to the floor of the garage, which is about 10 feet. But when we open the garage door, it rolls up and back along the track and underneath that distance sensor, which is then measuring the distance from the garage ceiling to the rolled up door, which is about 10 inches. So that distance measurement can therefore tell me whether or not the garage door is open. For the motion sensing, I could have used one of those Z-Wave sensors I showed earlier, but since I'm already going the DIY route, I bought a much cheaper sensor for another $2. Now these are just basic electronic components. They're not standalone devices. They need some kind of controller to power and control them. So I also bought a cheap Raspberry Pi Zero to be that controller, and then I bought a little camera to use as the video recording device. Now, wiring everything together was super easy, right? I don't need a soldering iron or anything special, just a couple of these jumper wires from Amazon or Micro Center. And getting the Pi to talk to the sensors is also really easy. The Pi can execute Python scripts, and there are Python libraries for interfacing with those sensors. A couple lines of code in a loop will continually monitor the motion sensor and the garage door status, and based on those values, I can choose whether or not to save a video. And that's cool, but I also want to get that data into Home Assistant so I can refer to those sensor values elsewhere in my system. The typical way of doing that is with something called MQTT, which is a very lightweight publish-subscribe protocol that's very widely used in home automation. You can install an MQTT broker directly in Home Assistant. Then with a few more lines of Python, I can send a JSON payload to that broker, which will automatically push the values into a Home Assistant sensor. So I now have a Raspberry Pi tracking motion and garage door status, and then pushing those values into Home Assistant. So the final requirement was some kind of visual indicator inside the house telling me the garage door was open. And once again, it's those Z-Wave light switches for the win. Some of the switches that I have come with a configurable color bar on the switch. Now, normally it's blue, and the brightness of the bar will indicate, how much dimming is being applied. But when the garage door changes state from closed to open, I change the color bars of a couple switches to red. That makes it really easy to see for anyone walking by one of those interior doors that the garage door has been left up and needs to be secured. And then when the door closes, I reset it back to its default blue color. It's very simple, but very, very effective. So for my final example, let's talk about control panels. If you spend any amount of time on Home Automation Reddit, you'll notice that a fancy control panel located on some wall in your house and available for anyone to use to manage all your lights is a de facto requirement to be one of the cool kids. The good news is that any device that can display a web browser or run an Android app can be a control panel when used with Home Assistant. Lots of people will mount like an old iPad to the wall, or they'll use a Raspberry Pi with some kind of tiny screen. But I bought this little 4-inch Android-powered display that mounts directly into a 2-gang wall switch, or a wall spot. Now this panel is running the Home Assistant app, and it's displaying a dashboard that I built. And that dashboard pulls together everything I've talked about so far. It allows anyone in my house to see the status of key systems and take control of lights and scenes without taking out their phone. So the garage door and front door icons will turn orange when they're open or unlocked, so it's easy to see that something needs to be secured. The laundry icon will turn yellow if the machines are in use, and then turn to a flashing orange icon when it's time to move the load to the next stage. If any of the water sensors detect water, I'll show a big red blinking alert. And I also show the salt level of my water softener. So when it's full, that little gauge is green, but as it runs low, the color changes to yellow and then red. So if we're like on the way out the door to Home Depot, we have a reminder that it's time to buy some more salt. Now I'm sharing this partially because I think it's really cool, but also because it demonstrates one final Home Assistant technique that I want to cover, and that's the use of templates for advanced configuration. The vast majority of Home Assistant configuration can be done through visual tools, but most features can also be toggled into a YAML editor where you can do advanced stuff. And most of those YAML configurations support the use of templates to provide property values. So I use templates to control the colors on that dashboard, to map numeric states into textual explanations, etc. Templates are a really, really powerful feature, and the cloud-based offerings don't have anything nearly as powerful. I just showed you 4 different real-world examples of how I've added smart, context-aware automations to my own home without cloud services. You can keep it simple, and you can use off-the-shelf stuff, or you can go the DIY route and start messing around with little electrical components. It's entirely up to you. But what about remote access? Because no matter how awesomely automated your home is, sooner or later you will have to leave it and go out into the world. Let's say that you leave in a hurry for vacation, you get a few miles down the road, and you have that like sinking feeling that you left the garage door open or the front door unlocked or whatever. If you're running everything locally, you can't connect to Home Assistant unless you're on the same local network. As soon as you drop off and onto your cell network, you'll lose access because your cell phone can't reach your private network. Now, you can DIY a solution to those problems if you're comfortable with dynamic DNS and port forwarding on your router. It's not terribly difficult. But if you want it to just work, you can do what I do, and you can pay $6 a month for the Home Assistant Cloud plugin. That plugin automates all of that working stuff and gives you a secure tunnel into your instance for remote access. Now, I do see the irony in recommending a cloud-based service in an anti-cloud session. I make an exception for this one. This is the only subscription fee that I have, and I'm happy to support the product, and I'm not reliant on that service. If it goes down, all I lose is remote access from my phone. All my lights and automations will keep working. That brings us to voice control. Alexa integration is super convenient, and for many people, the convenience of voice control outweighs my arguments about privacy and latency. For those people, losing voice control could be a complete deal breaker. The good news is that you do not need to give up voice control if you set up Home Assistant. That Home Assistant Cloud plugin also provides an Alexa integration. So you can talk to Alexa, and then Alexa talks to the Home Assistant Cloud, and that then sends the commands to your local instance. And that's great, as long as you already have a bunch of Alexa devices sitting around, and you're okay with Amazon processing your speech. But I'm not a big fan of letting big for-profit corporations listen in on my kitchen, living room, and bedroom. And on top of the privacy benefits, running a local voice assistant can be faster and give you more control over the whole process. Now, I don't have enough time here in this truncated session length to do a deep dive on voice control, so I'm going to skip straight to the conclusion. To do local voice control, you need a device that can recognize a wake word and send it to Home Assistant, and you need a service that can parse the voice recording into Home Assistant commands. The device part is easy. The company that produces the Home Assistant product recently released this hardware device, and it comes pretty close to Alexa in terms of microphone quality. This is technically a preview edition, so I expect the hardware to improve over the coming months. Now, by default, that device comes pre-configured to use the Home Assistant Cloud for processing. And it works really well, as long as you give the commands in the right syntax. But you can also hook it up to ChatGPT for processing. That gives you a far more conversational voice control at the added usage cost of using that AI engine. Or you can do what I do. I run a private LLM on a machine in my basement, and I use that to process my voice commands. It gives me the same conversational approach that ChatGPT does, but it's fully local and free. Now, one of the best parts about local voice control is that you can set up custom sentences to do some really cool stuff. So my wife loves Harry Potter and Lego. So for Christmas one year, I bought her that big Lego Hogwarts castle. She added a custom light kit that has all these little LED lights in the rooms and the parapets and all that. And in the Harry Potter movies, the spell for conjuring light is Lumos. So as a party trick, I hooked that light up to Home Assistant. So if anyone says Hogwarts Lumos, it turns on the light bulb, or the light kit, and lights up the castle. I got serious Husband of the Year points for that one. Now, back at the start, I told you that I'd show you what's possible with a locally controlled smart home, and we've really only scratched the surface. So very, very quickly, here are a few more things that I'm doing without the cloud. I'm tracking my electrical usage, broken down by individual circuit. I'm tracking my water meter, so I know how much water we're using and if we have any leaks. I monitor my security cameras, I track the humidity, my 3D printing filament storage boxes, even the battery levels on all my battery-powered sensors. There's very little that you can't do locally, and I'm not paying subscription fees for any of it. So here's the roadmap for getting started with your own smart home. That QR code and bit.ly link will go to my GitHub repo, where you'll find these slides, plus detailed notes of all the things that I've used, the resources that I followed, the hardware I like, etc. So if you decide to kind of follow my footsteps, drop me a line and let me know. And I think I have like 2 minutes for questions, so I'll take one really quickly, and then after that, you can get me on the Discord if you have more. So thank you for your time, and I'll take your questions. Yeah, back there.
Yeah, for your DIY implementation with the Raspberry Zero, how did you manage to power it? How did you manage to connect it?
Yeah. So the question is, I have that Raspberry Pi Zero monitoring my garage door. How did I power it? In that case, I have a power over Ethernet hat for it. It's a little device you can get. And then you can, with a power over Ethernet hub, you inject power and network cables connections together. So I just ran Cat5 through the ceiling or whatever. Yeah. Can you use Ring with Home Assistant? Probably. People have all kinds of Home Assistant integrations. I'm trying to de-Amazon, so I don't know. But there is a Alexa integration for voice-to-speech, sending commands. So I assume if you have a AWS-like developer key, there's probably options for it.
Have you tried, like, with either, like, phone for, like, identifying you versus your wife to see if you turn on the lights?
Yep. So the question is, have I tried figuring out who's doing what with the devices? So if people are running Home Assistant, you can identify or track them to a device, and you can do like presence detection. So it'll know, for instance, if my wife's phone is on the local network, then she's home. But it doesn't work for knowing who pressed the physical button, right? It works for you on the app. You could do that. You can't easily do it with the physical button. Although I like the challenge. I'll have to figure out a way to do that with the light switches. You can do a thing with Bluetooth BLE location trackers, so I actually can tell what room I'm in. It's not quite production ready, right? There's enough edge cases where I wouldn't want to say, yeah, use it for someone who's not tech savvy. But you can tell what room you are in. I use that a little bit. Yeah. Who am I using for what? Oh, smart speakers. Right now we have Amazon devices. I'm working on replacing them. Home Assistant has the ability to do audio output. So really anything that you can get onto like a microphone out or whatever, you could run it. Time for one more, then I got to go. Have I integrated home cleaning like Roombas or devices? I have not, but I've seen lots of people doing that. They have lots of things where they'll know that when they leave, it triggers the thing to come out. People go way, way down these rabbit holes, man. That's awesome. So I want to make room for the next speaker. I will be on the Discord or hanging out here for a little bit. If you want to talk more, come find me. Otherwise, thank you for your time. Have a good rest of the day.